when Cytiva came along, I was working in distribution. I saw this job. It was, selling filtration into lab filtration, but then also there was this brewing segment of it that sold into the quality control labs in breweries, and also wine and, canned cocktails, all of that. So I'm reading the description and I'm thinking like, this is a perfect job for me. I mean, it combines sales in the life science department, but also it's got like a toe in the water of the brewing industry. And it's things that I know about that I've used. Naturally the interview went really well, and that kind of led me to Cytiva.
You are listening to the Capital Craft Podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild. I am your host, Eric Fowler.
I'm Jeff Fox from Beer Media Co.
And Craig Nelson, Lab Filtration and Genomics Sales Specialist at Cytiva.
At least Craig knows where he's representing.
Yes,
fumbled a little bit there.
I did. That's kind of crazy, huh?
The many hats.
I know. Which hat am I wearing today? No.
But we're excited to sit down with you today. You've been involved in San Diego beer for quite a while and have made an impact on that scene, and now you're in a new role that we want to hear a little bit more about what your journey's been up until this point.
Yeah, so if you want to go back to my days of college, I decided to go back to school when I was 27, moved to Florida and started going to Broward College and Florida Atlantic University, and my focus at the time was microbiology and genetics. It was like the early 2000s. Gene sequencing was a big thing, and I was really interested in that. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I kind of wanted to go in that direction. So that's what I was going to school for. And like most people, I started homebrewing in a garage in Florida.
A timeless story.
Started homebrewing, and I was good at it. And I had also been cooking all my life. My mom is a great cook. She taught me how to cook when I was very young. So there's obviously a cooking element to brewing. And so those combination of, science and cooking and a little creativity, I think led me to be a great brewer, or a pretty good brewer. And so I, shortly after a couple days after I graduated college, I was offered a job at a brewery called Funky Buddha Brewery in Florida. You may have heard of it. So I took that job, and I worked my way up as, in the cellar, and then as a cellar manager, and then became a brewer eventually. And
so you're still just looking at how genes are expressed.
Yeah.
From yeast and other raw materials.
It's funny. I actually liked what you said there. As as a outsider looking in, brewing does kind of seem halfway between a kitchen and a lab.
Yeah, and that
it is.
Your story. It's always. Not always, but it's very common from somebody from a science background or engineering that goes into brewing.
Yes, because it is definitely a combination of those things. So when I graduated, I didn't know exactly. I knew that I didn't really want to work in a lab. I had worked in a lab in college, and I liked it, but I didn't see myself just as a lab employee. 40 hours a week. So the brewing thing was exciting, and I had won a bunch of home brewing awards. And, I thought maybe I could open a brewery of my own one day. We'll see what happens. But the job at Funky Buddha was great because I learned, that was a full scale production brewery. We had, it was a 30 barrel brew house. We had fermenters up to 180 barrels.
Yeah, which is pretty large for context, right?
It's like most large.
Of your brew pubs that you would go grab dinner maybe would be like a 10 barrel system and 10 or 20 barrel fermenters. So you're talking about a pretty large scale.
Yeah, it was pretty big. And so that's what I learned on. I learned on a 30 barrel. Yeah, most of the breweries in San Diego are 10 barrel brew house. That's what I had at Resident Brewing. So I learned on some large equipment, and I learned the whole full production of it. We had a little bit of a laboratory quality control program there. It was getting built as I was working there, and it was getting better. But we were always doing some kind of quality control there. yeah, so that's where I basically learned how to brew in a production setting. And then about 4 years later, I was kind of ready to get out of Florida, and San Diego was always on my radar as being one, a biotech mecca and a beer mecca. So, and it had great weather, right? So it had all the things that I wanted. So I did some research and I found this brewery that had just opened or was just opening, called Resident Brewing. And I flew out to San Diego and I met with Robert and Jimmy, some of the owners, and kind of hit it off with them. And Robert Masterson. He had invented the coconut R&R coconut IPA back at Stone. They had brewed it at Stone. I had drank it in Florida. I thought it was pretty good. So it was exciting. And Robert didn't have any production experience, but he was a really good home brewer. So he hired me. I came out to San Diego in 2016. I would say that was around the height of everything. It was pretty crazy in San Diego, and the beer industry in America was pretty crazy at that point. And I think it was like about a high point around that time. So it was a great time to be in San Diego, and the San Diego brewing community really welcomed me with open arms. It was a little intimidating at first, coming from Florida where there was only a few breweries, and coming out to San Diego with so many good breweries.
Especially during that time, yeah.
Especially at that time.
There's a lot of key openings like 2016, 2017.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And there's some really good beer being made out here. And so, like I said, a little intimidating, but I knew what I was doing. I was pretty confident that I would make a name for myself here. And people just were very welcoming here, and San Diego is a very welcoming place. So I felt at home here, and it was great. So I started in spring of 2016 with Resident Brewing, and I stayed there until about 2020. And had made some great beers there. I think we did some really good things, and Resident made a name for itself in San Diego, which I think is hard to do. But it was tough being downtown, that's for sure. It was I don't know if you've ever been there, and now it's since closed, but it was kind of a logistical nightmare. But one of the reasons why I liked the setting is because it was kind of a brew pub setting. You had a 10-barrel system, so pretty small, kind of a boutique brewing system, and then you had the restaurant connected to it, with the full bar and everything. So it was, and then it had a basement area where we kept all the grain, which was, like I said, a logistical nightmare, but kind of amazing. But then it kind of did turn into a production setting at some point. During Resident, I tried to create some kind of quality control program, to make sure that our beers were, there was no spoilers, doing some basic yeast counting with a basic microscope, obviously using a hydrometer, and a hemocytometer, for the yeast counting. We did some basic quality control there. It was a good experience at Resident, and I stayed there until 2020.
What was the experience like going from a production brewery that was assumingly very process driven, and if there were any changes, they would probably be made incrementally over long periods of time, to a brewery that's becoming established, who doesn't have any processes in place, and if you want to make a change, you could probably flip a recipe or a process 180 tomorrow. Did you like that control and freedom, or did it also at the same time cause headaches and problems because it wasn't as dialed in yet?
We had some dialed in recipes at Funky Buddha, but it was still, when I was there, it was still small enough that I was friends with the owner, and we had some really great employees. So if we wanted to change something, it wasn't that hard, although we did have SOPs in place. And it was shift brewing. So while I was brewing at Funky Buddha, during the last year I was there, I was, coming in at like 4 a.m. and working until like 2 in the afternoon. And we had 3 to 4 shifts. So in that way, it was a lot different. But I still had a little bit of free reign to change recipes if I wanted, but it was more of a collaboration between the group of brewers and the owners. So yeah, but that was a change moving to Resident, where it was literally just me. Robert obviously was there for support, and he would come help brew sometimes too, but he had a full-time job. He was an IT guy. So I was there a lot more than 40 hours a week, I'll tell you that. But, yeah, I mean, obviously if I wanted to change something, I would just call up Robert, or we would talk about it there. And it was easy to change things and make tweaks to recipes. And, it was fun developing SOPs, developing recipes of my own and of Robert's, that we, collaborated on and, created some pretty good recipes and pretty good beers. And so yeah, it was different in a lot of ways, going from a team of people to just me, and sometimes I had an assistant brewer. Yeah.
When you mentioned that when you were deciding to move here from Florida, that you had both the biotech and the brewing scene in mind. What kind of directed you? What was that moment where you decided that beer was that always going to be the primary plan? And like, when did that passion, like when was that the decision that you kind of made?
Yeah. So I went with the brewing thing, like I said, a few days after I graduated. And I said, you know what, I'm really enjoying doing this right now. I'm going to see where this takes me. And so I did that until 2020. And at some point around 2019, maybe 2018, 2019, I always had it in the back of my head that, look, if the beer thing doesn't work out, which it might not, even if I really like it and I'm going to do really well at it, I might not be able to have the level of success that I want. I have dreams of, purchasing a home, and that is difficult to do in San Diego, as we all know. So at some point, I thought to myself, look, I'm not where I want to be. I tried to expand the brewery to another production facility and other tasting rooms while I was there, and we had a negotiation to actually purchase the space that now is Pure Project in Vista here. And that fell through. And it was after that, I was kind of like my last ditch effort. So as a backup plan, I said, if the beer thing doesn't work out, Biotech is here. I'm going to see what I can try to do to get back in the life science world. I don't know where I'll fit in yet, but I do have sales experience from, my younger 20s. I like sales. I like helping people. I like talking to people. So if I can combine all the knowledge that I've had in my past, maybe I can do something in the biotech industry in San Diego.
Yeah. How'd you finagle that into still being here talking about beer?
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
And let's see, how many hours do we have here? Because, I could talk about that for hours, but it was quite a journey. So what happened was the pandemic hit, right? And before that, I was looking for positions, but I couldn't find the correct position where I had the right experience. It was kind of a leap going from a brewer, even though I was part of business owner and I was doing a lot of other, business things at Resident. It was still a jump for people to accept. So I did a lot of interviews and, nothing really came through to fruition. But then, so the pandemic hits, and I have a friend that works at the San Diego Public Health Lab, here in San Diego, and
got really busy during the pandemic.
And exactly. So COVID hits, and so I was talking to my friend one day, and she says, oh my God, like, we need microbiologists, to do all this PCR at the public health lab. I said, well, no, I'm a microbiologist by my schooling. And she said, oh, well, look, come down and do an interview, and we can probably get you a job there. And I said, great. So I did that. I got the job, became a microbiologist at the county public health lab, and was, trained on all this equipment that I knew generally about. I studied PCR, but I had never really done it start to finish. So, a couple weeks of training there, and I was doing PCR every day, and all the tests would come in from the local sites. So it was an important thing to do, obviously, for the community. And so I felt like I got out of the brewing, it was the right time for me, and I could do something positive for the community, and so it was a win-win for me.
Protecting your beer's highest quality is crucial to maintain its unique taste and prevent spoilage. Organisms and microbiological testing plays a vital role in this process. Cytiva offers a comprehensive portfolio of laboratory filtration products designed for both lab and production floor use. Our products are portable, affordable, and suitable for any size craft brewing operation. We support brewing with microbiological testing for spoilage organisms, filtration for degassing and yeast removal, shelf life and product release analysis, and chemical testing of raw ingredients. Discover how Cytiva can help you protect the quality of your beer today. Visit the link below, cytiva.link/70GNB to learn more. Are you passionate about the craft brewing industry? Join the community that's shaping the future of beer in San Diego by becoming a professional or affiliate member of the San Diego Brewers Guild today. Unlock exclusive benefits, including access to industry events, educational resources, and networking opportunities. Elevate your craft, expand your network, and make a difference in the thriving craft beer scene in San Diego. Visit sdbeer.com for more information and to take the next steps towards becoming the heartbeat of craft beer. Join the Capital of Craft podcast in the San Diego Brewers Guild, where passion meets discussion and education. San Diego Brewers Guild, celebrating craft beer in San Diego since 1997. Yeah, what I think a lot of people didn't realize, though, was like a lot of that equipment, they needed, negative 80C freezers for the vaccines, and then the PCR, like a lot of that has been found in breweries, and, not small breweries, but yeah. It's equipment that's become very common in a lot of mid or large breweries. So when that was going on, it was interesting to see that parallel on the importance of, how the pandemic was impacting everybody, but also that technology has becoming so readily available, and breweries are opening up to build out labs to have some of the same capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So how did that translate then into supporting breweries with some of the same mindset?
Well, so, I had to take a few more steps to get where I am today, obviously. So there was a couple jobs in between. I worked at a company called BioLegend here in San Diego, and that they sell antibodies and reagents. So I took a few steps there in between, and then I was somewhere in between sales, selling life science equipment or reagents or something, ingredients, and somewhere in the brewing industry was kind of out there, right? So when Cytiva came along, I was working in distribution, and I saw this job come up, this role, and it was, selling filtration into lab filtration, but then also there was this brewing segment of it that sold into the quality control labs in breweries, and also wine and canned cocktails, all of that. So I'm reading the description and I'm thinking, like, this is a perfect job for me. I mean, it combines, sales in the life science department, but also it's got like a toe in the water of the brewing industry. And it's things that I know about, that I've used. And so, naturally the interview went really well, and that kind of led me to Cytiva. So it was kind of a shoe-in there.
Yeah. So what does your interaction look like with breweries today, and what's one thing that you are really advocating breweries start, implementing in terms of quality control?
So yeah, definitely quality control is super important. And I think if you are thinking about opening a brewery, or if you have an existing brewery that's doing a very minimal quality control, you need to budget for it. It has to be a percentage of your budget. Whatever your budget is, you need to allot a little bit of money, whether that's just, you can start small, it could just be, a microscope and a hemocytometer. I mean, you get that for a few $100. filter. Obviously, you need the filters to, filter the beer and get the yeast out, so that you can do testing, with the hydrometers, and then eventually you can get the bigger instruments, and maybe do some plating and incubating. And these are things that you can learn. You don't need to be a formally trained microbiologist to learn some of these basic techniques. I mean, you can go on YouTube. You can talk to other breweries in San Diego. I mean, San Diego, we always say San Diego is like the best brewing community in the world, right? I mean, what other industry can you like go to your competitor and say, hey, can you help me do this? And they'll help you out. Right. I guarantee you, if you talk to somebody else in the lab, they'll teach you how to do these things. But I can't stress enough how important it is, to do this kind of quality control, and allot the money and the time, along with the spending of the hops and the grain and everything.
Yeah, I mean, and I think most people probably in the beer industry know who Cytiva is, but could you just give a quick rundown of what it is you guys do, and how that impacts the brewing community?
Yeah. So Cytiva is a company that is kind of a combination of a few different companies, and actually it's a combination of Pall Life Sciences, Pall, which makes a lot of the filters. And that company is many years old. And then you have Wattman, which also makes, Wattman is a British company, and they go back to, I think, like the 1700s. So they're a real old company that also makes a lot of membranes and highly specialized filters. So it's a combination of that, and then GE Life Sciences that makes some of the instrumentation for chromatography that we also sell. So Cytiva and Danaher is the parent company that Cytiva is umbrellaed under, and so Cytiva is a combination of those companies, Wattman, Pall mainly, and GE Health. And so, all of those products came together to make Cytiva. And, a lot of the Pall products, you'll still see branded with Pall if you walk in a laboratory, in a good laboratory like maybe Stone has. You'll see Pall Life Sciences branding. It'll eventually say Cytiva, but for now it still says the branding started around 2020. So they're still working on that branding, so it still says Pall on a lot of the products. But we make a lot of little funnels that you can take the beer sample right out of the fermenter and take it into the lab and test it out. And so the filters are used all over the laboratory in quality control labs, but as well as biotech labs too.
And I'm sure it depends is going to be the answer, but do you need any, if you were going to look at implementing some of this filtration in a lab or starting, do you need any specialty pumps or specialty equipment, or are there some products for certain testing that is simple as just letting it sit and slowly filter out so that you have,
Exactly. Like I said before, you can start out small. Of course, if you have a bigger lab and you need to do multiple samples, every day, some of these breweries have, dozens of tanks. So, then you can set up a little like vacuum pump, and you can, filter them all at once in a pretty speedy fashion, but you don't need that. You can just, let it gravity filter out. And so, instead of buying a coffee filter, you can we have the fluted filters that look like coffee filters, but they're much better. So you don't have to buy the instruments. You can work your way up if you want, if you increase your capacity and you eventually need that, you can, but you can start small.
And what are some things that you would do with that filtered sample, and how might that impact finished beer?
So, I mean, at the very basic level, you're just filtering beer right out of the fermenter, through the cone filter, and using a hydrometer. I mean, that's what every brewery is doing. Even if you're just brewing 5 gallons, you need to do that. Should be doing it every day. But just hydrometer testing, straight out of the tank, and then measuring sugar levels in there, and then seeing the gradual fermentation. So it's going to drop from high gravity, where it's just basically all sugar, and then you're going to drop it down to where it's, really dry, and you maybe just have a little bit of residual sugar.
Yeah.
And then you're just taking measurements. I mean, if you're listening and you're a brewer, you know how to do this kind of stuff. It's very basic, going back to home brewing.
So it'll help with consistency of the measurements, and then speed up the process and remove any like biological material or proteins or anything that would normally separate over time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need to separate. Also, you're degassing, because if you have gas in the like carbon dioxide in the sample, you're not getting an accurate reading. So you need to degas it, and then there's also going to be yeast in there. So you're filtering everything out, so you have a uniform, homogeneous beer liquid that is free of air bubbles or CO2 bubbles.
Is that, or I know we're getting in the weeds a little bit, but I'm personally interested, is that of added importance if you use like a density meter or something that has that could be affected by gas? Or
I mean, there's many different ways to check. I mean, I mentioned hydrometer because that's the cheapest and easiest thing for everybody to use, but you can use other instruments. You can get a density meter if you want to spend the money on that. There are cheaper versions of those, and I'm sure there's probably new inventions in the last couple of years that have come out.
It's crazy how much homebrewing's actually influenced some of that. On the professional scale too. Oh,
absolutely. But honestly, a hydrometer is a safe bet. I would recommend getting, the multi-stage hydrometer, not just the single homebrewer one. Get the 3-step one where you get the range is a little bit bigger and it's a little more accurate, a little more precise.
What would you say a good QC program does for a brewery? I mean, obviously, if you're able to measure things, you're able to repeat it more times, and so with that consistency. But like some of this equipment, it sounds like if you're removing some solids that might spoil, some things like that, it affects the quality of the end product and maybe the shelf life. Could you go into like what a good QC program does for a brewery?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I mentioned before, I mean, at the very minimum, you're testing the fermentation and watching it, and the sugars go down. But then you can step it up to yeast counting, as I mentioned, also with the basic microscope and a hemocytometer. You can get into plating and looking for microbiological testing. So you're looking for beer spoilers. You're looking for certain kinds of wild yeast or bacteria that might grow. So you can take samples every day out of a fermenter and see if anything comes up, and within like a day or two, you'll know if there's something wild, growing in your beer, and then you stop it and you have to dump it if there is something crazy, and you don't want it to contaminate other parts of your brewery. So plating, and then you can get into, as the brewery gets bigger. You can get into some analytical testing, and that's where some of our other products could come in play for some sample prep. But you can move up to using like a gas chromatography or different kinds of chromatography instrumentation to run it through this highly specialized instrument that would tell you what molecule is in it, what molecules are in it, so you can see like, hey, there is something weird in there that we don't know. What is that? And it'll give you peaks and stuff, and you need to know how to read that. But yeah, you can get pretty crazy with the analytical instruments as well.
Yeah, and so it sounds like this investment that you're making into your QC ends up in better, more consistent beer in the long run.
Absolutely. Especially if you're doing any kind of distribution, you need, the more distribution you do, the more quality control you need to do, because you're shipping across town, you're shipping out of state, out of the county, out of the state. You have to invest in the quality control, because if there is a spoiler, something in the beer, and you're shipping that out, I mean, not only could you have potentially exploding bottles or cans, which has happened, and then you have to bring it all back. It costs you a lot more money and then what is the cost to your reputation? Right. That's a number that it's hard to put a number on.
Yeah, if someone has a bad experience with your beer, are they going to buy it again?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had a non-San Diego beer within the last 2 weeks. I hadn't tried it yet. I gave it to my father-in-law, and he's like, "Oh, this is really good." And I was like, "Oh, that is a good beer. I'm glad you like it." And I tried one of the beers from the same pack, and I was like, this has got lactic acid in it, and it shouldn't. And lactic acid, mind you, is not like
probably not the worst spoiler.
Yeah, and if you don't know better, there's a lot of beers intentionally that are sour, so he probably didn't think anything of it, but I just drove me nuts, and needless to say, the rest of the beers, no longer, not consumed. But what before we wrap up today, like what would you like to see from the San Diego brewing industry in terms of your professional mission now and what you're doing to support the industry? What would you like to see change or become a little more aware over the next year?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would like to see more quality control programs be put in place, even in the smaller breweries. As I mentioned before, all the little things that you can start out with. But like I said, you need to budget for that. So if we can somehow get all these smaller breweries on board to just start a little bit of QC, and I mean most of them do, but I think we need to develop that more, and we need to maintain our reputation as San Diego being one of the best beer cities in the world. And the way to do that is through quality control for sure.
So say you're a brand new brewery just starting out, or maybe a small brewery that's looking to up their distribution level, and they're thinking, you know what, maybe it's time for a QC program. How would they reach you?
So you can go to the Cytiva website anytime you want. Obviously, you can reach me through LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Just search Craig Nelson. You can just Google search me, and I will come up as a LinkedIn profile. Connect with me. And reach out to me, send me a message on LinkedIn. My email address, we might list it on one of the spots, but it's Craig.Nelson.
We'll toss it in the description.
Yeah, and
how do you spell it, just so we're clear?
Craig.Nelson at Cytiva.com.
Got it.
So, so start there.
Cool. Well, we appreciate you taking time out today and letting our audience learn a little bit more about you and your journey and how it's affected San Diego craft beer and how San Diego craft beer has affected you. But we've been really grateful to take the time and sit down with you today.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to the Capital of Craft podcast. If you want to see more, make sure that you subscribe on all the channels, and you can follow us at SD Brewers on Instagram, where you can see a lot more. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome.